Anger is not just shouting or clenching your fists. It's that silent fire that eats away at you from the inside when something doesn't go as you expected. It's that urge to break things, to say what you know you're going to regret, to act without thinking. It's that force that dominates you, shakes you, and then leaves you emptier than before. The worst part is that many see it as normal, as part of their character. That's just how I am, they say, as if they couldn't change, as if being angry was an identity, not a problem. But the truth is that anger, if you don't master it, consumes you. And it doesn't just take away your peace, it takes your relationships, your decisions, your respect, your health. The Stoics knew this. For them, anger was one of the most destructive passions of the soul. They compared it to a momentary madness, and not because they were cold or distant, but because they understood that whoever cannot govern themselves is condemned to be a slave to their impulses. But today, it's not enough with just beautiful phrases from Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus. We need to understand why we get angry, what happens in our brain, how that impulse is formed, how it is reinforced, and above all, how it is reversed. That's why this video goes beyond just repeating what Seneca said. We're going to combine classical philosophy with modern tools, psychology, neuroscience, and above all, common sense. I'm not promising you that you're going to stop getting angry. That would be a lie. What I do promise is that if you pay attention to what's coming, you're going to stop being dominated by your rage. You're going to learn to transform it into clarity, into action, into control. This is not for those who seek soft solutions. It's for those who are tired of being dragged by their own fury and want to regain control. Now let's go with the 8 ways to master anger from a Stoic perspective, applicable in the real world, not in fantasy books. 1. Break the external blame. If there's anything that fuels anger like gasoline on a fire, it's the constant need to blame someone else. That obsession with finding an enemy, an external culprit. We were taught from a young age that when something doesn't go the way we want, there's always someone responsible out there. The person who spoke to us badly, the driver who cut us off, the boss who doesn't respect us, the partner who doesn't understand us, society, the system, the past. Always something or someone, anything but us. And yes, many times things are unfair. Sometimes people really do behave like a disaster. But the problem isn't what others do. The problem is that we become addicted to pointing the finger. We become professional victims. And when you put yourself in that place, you automatically lose control of your life. You hand over the keys to your emotional stability to everything around you. The Stoics understood it in a brutally clear way. You can't control what others do, but you can control your judgment about it. Epictetus put it bluntly. It's not the things that affect us, but our opinion of them. And here's where the break comes in. Because when you stop looking for culprits out there, you realize that anger is not an automatic response. It's a decision, one that you often make without realizing it, because your mind is trained to react. But you can retrain it. Neuroscience confirms it. Anger is not a magic switch that turns on by itself. It's a chain. First, something happens, then you interpret it. And that's where everything is defined. That microsecond between the stimulus and your response is the door to control. If you live blaming others, that door is locked. But if you start looking inward, you can put the key in and change the course. Literally, change the chemistry of your brain. Because anger is linked to the limbic system, that primitive part of the brain responsible for emotional reaction. But the prefrontal cortex, the most evolved area, has the ability to intervene, to reason, to stop. The problem is that if you're always justifying your anger with what others do, you never train that part, and anger becomes reflex, not choice. Breaking external blame is not softness. It's not justifying the unjustifiable. It's taking absolute responsibility for your reaction. And that, although it sounds contradictory, gives you back power. Because if what makes me angry depends on what the other person does, I'm screwed. But if it depends on how I interpret, process, and decide to respond, then I have control. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and Stoic to the bone, wrote in his diary, "When you rise in the morning, think that you will meet with meddlesome, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and rude people." He didn't say it with resignation. He said it with acceptance, because he understood that expecting the world not to provoke you is a trap. What matters is what you do when it provokes you. The first step to mastering your anger is to stop seeing others as inevitable triggers. They are just people, doing what they know, what they can, what they learned. Maybe they are clumsy. Maybe they are selfish. Maybe, yes, they are wrong. So what? You are not their reflection. You are free, but only if you decide it. Do you want to master your rage? Start by breaking the narrative that others make you angry. No one has that power unless you give it to them. That's Stoicism in action. Not a nice phrase, not a quote for Instagram. Real action, daily practice, a mental habit. When someone offends you, ask yourself, is this person really in control of my internal state? Am I going to give away my peace just because they said something stupid? Am I going to throw everything away because someone behaved badly? If the answer is yes, then you're not angry because of what they did. You're angry because you believe the world owes you something, and it's not giving it to you. And that, more than anger, is ego. Breaking external blame is the beginning of an internal revolution. It's about stopping being an emotional hostage and starting to live from a firmer, more serene, freer place. Do you want real strength? Control yourself. Do you want real power? Stop blaming. And when you do, you'll discover that many of the things that used to ignite you simply stop having power over you. 2. Look at the monster without blinking. Mastering anger is not about hiding it or pretending it doesn't exist. It's not about smiling on the outside while you're burning on the inside. Nor is it about swallowing everything until you explode. That's not strength, it's repression. And everything you repress ends up coming out worse. If you really want to control it, the first thing you have to do is face the anger head on. No excuses, no disguises. You have to look at the monster without blinking. The problem is that many people are afraid of their anger, not because it's dangerous, but because it reveals parts of themselves they don't want to accept. Anger exposes the ego, insecurity, the need for control, the desire for revenge, unresolved pain. It shows you things you don't like about yourself, and that's why you prefer to ignore it or justify it. But what you don't face dominates you. What you don't understand controls you. And anger is no exception. The Stoics didn't talk about suppressing emotions. They talked about understanding them, analyzing them with a clear mind, like a doctor examining a wound, without judgment, but with precision. For Marcus Aurelius, emotions were natural phenomena of the soul. He didn't deny them, but he didn't feed them either. He said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your perception of it, and you have the power to change that perception at any moment. That's the key, to observe carefully what you feel and discover what is really causing it. Because often anger is nothing more than the mask of another emotion. You get angry because you're scared, because you feel attacked, because you don't know how to handle what's happening, because you're frustrated with yourself. But it's easier to shout than to acknowledge the wound. It's more comfortable to blame others than to admit that there's something wrong with you. And as long as you keep reacting without understanding, you'll keep losing, over and over again. Psychology calls this emotional awareness. It's the ability to identify what you're feeling before you act. And it's not a mystical gift. It's a skill that can be trained. When you feel the rage rising, don't run away. Don't explode. Stop. Observe. What are you feeling exactly? What triggered it? What thoughts crossed your mind? What story are you telling yourself at that moment? Because anger is almost never about what it seems. There are layers, and if you don't explore them, you'll live trapped on the surface. Neuroscience backs this up clearly. When you practice self-observation, you activate areas of the brain that allow you to regulate your emotions. You are literally creating new neural pathways that give you more control over your impulses. It's not magic, it's constant practice. It's looking at the monster and saying, "I see you. I understand why you're here, but I'm in charge." That's the difference between someone who explodes and someone who dominates. Looking at the monster without blinking also means assuming that your anger has consequences. It's not something that only happens inside you. It impacts what you say, how you act, how you relate. Every time you lose control, you leave marks, sometimes on other people, sometimes on yourself. And these marks accumulate. They turn into guilt, shame, regret. That's why it's so important to see clearly what you're doing before it's too late. It's not about not feeling anything. It's about feeling everything with awareness. The Stoic is not cold, he is firm. He is not indifferent, he is wise. Because he knows that there is no greater victory than mastering oneself in the midst of chaos. And for that, he needs to see everything that happens inside, without fear, without lies, without evasions. Look at your anger. Study it. Ask it questions. What does it want to tell you? What pain is feeding it? What belief keeps it alive? And above all, what part of you benefits from continuing to feel it? Because often it's your pride that doesn't want to let go. It's your ego that needs to be right. But you are not your ego. You are the part that can observe everything and choose. Mastering anger begins by stop running from it. Don't ignore it. Don't deny it. Don't justify it. Look at it head on, with a firm heart and an open mind. And when you do, you'll notice something. The monster wasn't as big as it seemed. It just needed someone to look at it bravely and put it in its place. 3. Breathe like a sage. Do not react like a slave. One of the clearest signs that someone does not have mastery over themselves is the speed at which they react. Just one word, one look, a misinterpreted tone, and they explode. They shout, slam the table, insult, throw accusations. They act before they think. And then, when they calm down, regret comes. But it's too late. They've hurt, destroyed, lost. That's not strength, that's emotional slavery. You're being controlled by your most primitive instinct. You're reacting like a cornered animal, not like a rational being. The Stoic does not act this way. The Stoic breathes. And I don't say it as a cheap meditation cliché. I say it with weight, with meaning. Because breathing is the anchor between impulse and action. It's the small crack through which consciousness seeps. And if you learn to use it, it can save you from yourself. Every time something ignites you inside, Do not react immediately. Stop. Breathe deeply. Once, twice, as many times as necessary. Not to calm down, although that too, but to remember that you decide how to act. That pause, that simple act of breathing, gives your rational mind time to activate. It's in that space where you regain control. Neuroscience confirms it. Deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps you relax and think clearly. It reduces the activity of the amygdala, that area of the brain that triggers the emotional reaction. You are literally changing your physical and mental state in seconds. It's a powerful tool, and the best part, you always carry it with you. Behavioral psychology also teaches it. The key to changing an emotional habit is not to eliminate the emotion, but to interrupt the automatic pattern that follows it. If every time you get angry, you react the same way, you're reinforcing the same circuit over and over again. But if you insert a pause, if you introduce conscious breathing between the stimulus and the response, you're breaking the cycle. You're writing a new script, one where you're in charge. Epictetus said, "No one can hurt you without your consent." But that consent is often given in a second, when you don't think, when you don't stop. That's why the pause is so valuable, because it's the moment when you choose not to give your peace to the provocation. Some believe that breathing, waiting, restraining oneself is a sign of weakness. That true power lies in responding with force, with shouts, with slams on the table. But there's nothing easier than reacting. The hard part is stopping. The strong thing is not to explode. The strong thing is to contain the fire and channel it intelligently. Not just anyone can do that. That's done by someone who trains every day to be master of themselves. Marcus Aurelius, in the midst of wars, betrayals, diseases, and political chaos, wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like those who harm you." And how do you achieve that? Not by reacting the same way they do, not by falling into the same game. Breathing when everything inside you screams to act without thinking. Imagine that every time you feel anger, an invisible door appears in front of you. A door that you can cross or ignore. If you ignore it, you react as you always do, lose control, and end up regretting it. But if you cross that door, and you do it by breathing, pausing, observing, you pass to the other side with dignity, with power, with awareness. It's not easy, but every time you achieve it, you become stronger. Breathing like a sage is not just another technique, it's a statement. It's saying, "I can feel this fury, but I won't let it control me." It's accepting the emotion without becoming it. It's showing that you have a level of control that very few people achieve. The next time someone provokes you, do not respond immediately. Stay silent. Inhale slowly. Exhale deeply. Repeat if necessary. That space you create not only protects you, it transforms you, because it stops being a reaction and becomes a choice. And that's the real power, choosing how to act, even when everything in you wants to scream. If you want to master your anger, start by mastering your breathing. Because the one who breathes thinks, the one who thinks decides, and the one who decides clearly will never be a slave to their anger. 4. Disarm your judgments. You don't get angry about what happens. You get angry about what you think about what happens. That's the root. The real enemy is not the situation, it's the judgment you make about it. And as long as you don't understand this, you will live reacting as if everything that happens was a direct threat to your worth, to your identity, to your world. But it's not. What happens is just that, something that happens. The rest is put in by you. Imagine someone interrupts you while you're speaking. The action itself is simple, but what makes you angry is not the fact, it's the interpretation. He's disrespecting me. I don't matter to him. They always ignore me. Here we go again. In seconds, your mind constructs a complete story from a single gesture. That story sets you on fire inside, and you react with fury. But you're not defending yourself from reality. You're defending yourself from your own idea of what happened. Disarming your judgments is realizing this. It's learning to separate the fact from the interpretation. It's having the discipline not to believe everything you think in the moment. Because your thoughts, in the heat of the moment, are often distorted. They are filtered by the ego, by fatigue, by past experiences, by wounds that you never finished healing. And if you don't learn to question them, you end up acting from fiction. Psychology calls it cognitive distortion. These are mental patterns that exaggerate, generalize, dramatize. When you're angry, it's easy to fall into them. They always treat me like this. Everyone is against me. This shouldn't be happening. But these thoughts are not truths. They are traps, and anger feeds on these traps. If you don't detect them, if you don't disarm them, they end up governing your reaction. Mastering judgment requires a skill that few people practice: self-observation. See what you're thinking at the moment. The emotion begins to grow. Ask yourself, is what I'm thinking a fact or an interpretation? Am I reacting to what really happened or to what I think it means? Am I sure it's as serious as it seems, or am I seeing everything from a distorted filter? That mental pause can change everything. It's not denial, it's not passivity, it's clarity. Because while others respond automatically, you are choosing from consciousness. You're cutting the impulse at the root, not at the surface. You're disarming the judgment before it turns into an explosion. Neuroscience also has something to say here. Every time you identify an irrational thought and correct it, you're activating your prefrontal cortex and reducing impulsive emotional activity. You're training your brain to see more clearly, to respond instead of react, to have perspective instead of losing your head. But this is not achieved with pretty phrases or highlighted books. It is achieved with practice, every day, in every moment. When someone crosses your path, when they tell you something you didn't expect, when you feel that everything irritates you, that's when you have to stop and check. What am I thinking at this moment? Does this thought help me or poison me? Is it real, or is it a story I'm telling myself to justify my anger? Because if judgment is the trigger, then control is in the way you think. No one can prevent you from having automatic thoughts, but you can choose not to get stuck in them. You can let the emotion pass without turning it into an action. You can breathe, observe, and correct. You don't need to be right all the time. You don't need everything to be perfect. You don't need to control others. You need to control your thoughts, because that's where it all starts. That's where anger is born, and that's where it can be deactivated. The next time you feel yourself burning inside, don't look outward. Look at what you're thinking, and ask yourself one question. Am I seeing what happened? Or am I seeing what I want to believe happened? If you have the courage to ask yourself that question, you'll also have the strength to change your answer. Disarming your judgments is defusing the bomb before it explodes. It's stopping fighting imaginary enemies. It's living with less anger and more truth. And there's nothing more powerful than that. 5. Treat them like children. Sometimes anger stems from an impossible expectation, expecting everyone to act with maturity, logic, and respect. But the reality is different. People don't always think before they speak. They don't always measure the consequences of what they do. They don't always have emotional control. And if you live expecting everyone to behave up to par, you will live disappointed and angry. This is where a change of perspective comes in, that although initially uncomfortable, can completely liberate you. Start seeing people as emotional children. It's not with contempt, it's with clarity. Because often, that's exactly what they are. People who never learn to handle their frustration, who act on impulse, who seek attention, who need to be right, who don't know how to apologize. And if you respond with the same energy, you fall into their game. You become one more. But if you learn to treat them as what they are, immature minds trapped in adult bodies, your reaction completely changes. It's not about feeling superiority, it's about having a broader view. To understand that many times, that person who yells at you is not being evil, they're being limited. That whoever insults you is probably repeating patterns they've been dragging for years. That whoever provokes you often doesn't even know what they're doing. And if you take it personally, you lost. Because you're fighting against someone who doesn't even understand the damage they cause. Seeing others as emotional children does not mean allowing anything. It doesn't mean staying silent or being submissive. It means not responding with the same energy. It means keeping your center when the other has lost it. It means having control, not weakness. Psychology has shown that most explosive reactions come not from the present, but from unresolved wounds. People who grew up with rejection, with deficiencies, with negative models, and who now repeat these behaviors without realizing it. They are trapped in their emotions. They haven't learned to grow inside. If you expect maturity from someone who hasn't healed, you will always end up frustrated. Here comes an act of practical wisdom. Observe without absorbing. See the other's reaction without letting it drag you, as if you were watching a child throwing a tantrum. You don't yell with him. You don't stoop to his level. You see him, you understand him, and you act with a cool head. You can do the same with adults who haven't yet learned to manage themselves. This is not romanticism. It's emotional strategy. Because when you respond from calmness, you control the scene. You set the pace. You maintain your power. The other can yell, insult, provoke. But if you don't enter that game, you win. Not because you impose yourself, but because you don't drag yourself. In neuroscience, this is related to emotional self-regulation. It's the ability to maintain internal stability even when the environment becomes chaotic. It's trained, it's strengthened, and every time you choose not to respond from anger, your brain creates new roots that make you more resilient, more lucid, stronger. Treating people like emotional children is not underestimating them. It's stop idealizing them. It's understanding that not everyone has your level of consciousness, your level of inner work, your ability to control. And if you react like them, how are you different? Anger often stems from wanting to change the other, from demanding that they be as you want. But you didn't come to educate adults. You came to educate yourself. Your task is not to reform the character of others, it's to build your own. When you understand this, anger loses strength. Because you stop expecting the impossible, you stop taking everything as a personal attack, and you start responding with a different energy, firmer, more conscious, freer. There are people who will continue to act immaturely. You can't control that. But you can choose not to respond with the same clumsiness. You can keep calm. You can keep your dignity. You can stand firm without getting lost in the other's chaos. Treat them like children, not to mock, not to feel more, but to not drag yourself to the same level of emotional blindness. because whoever controls themselves when the other loses control has already won. 6. Rewrite the mental script. Every person lives within a story, a narrative that repeats itself in their mind day after day. They don't respect me. They always ignore me. Everything goes wrong for me. People are trash. I have to defend myself, or they walk all over me. That mental script is not reality, but it determines how you interpret it. And if the script is contaminated, every scene you live becomes a threat. Anger often does not come from what happens, but from what you believe the meaning of what happens is. If someone is late, the fact is simple. But if in your mind, that fact confirms the idea that you are not valued, then you explode. Not because of the delay, but because the script is screaming at you that you are being belittled again. Therefore, one of the most powerful tools to master anger is this: rewrite the script. Question the stories you repeat to yourself. Not everything is personal. Not everything is an attack. Not everything is directed against you. Sometimes things just happen. People make mistakes, act without thinking, drag their own struggles. It's not about you, it's about them. Changing the script does not mean denying what you feel. It means seeing more clearly. It means choosing an interpretation that empowers you, not one that takes power away from you. Because if everything that happens confirms that the world is against you, you are going to live in constant anger. But if you understand that often your thoughts are nothing more than mental habits, you can start to rewrite them. You can tell yourself something else. You can give yourself another perspective. And with that, your reaction changes. You don't need to live trapped in the same old story. You have the right and the responsibility to create a narrative that doesn't harm you, one that doesn't trigger your anger at every step, one that helps you stand firm without turning every friction into a war. Mastering anger is also an act of editing, because when you change what you tell yourself, you change what you feel, and by changing that, everything else changes. 7. Become a guide, not a victim. Anger is comfortable when you put yourself in the role of victim. They did it to me. They provoked me. They pushed me to the limit. You wash your hands and blame the world. But as long as you stay in that place, you have no power, because the one who feels like a victim waits for everything to change to be okay. And that's not going to happen. Life does not adapt to your emotional state. It's you who has to take control. To stop being a victim is not to accept the unfair. It is to stop using it as an excuse to lose control. It is to change the question from "why do they do this to me?" to "how do I choose to respond to this?" That difference changes everything, because that's where the figure of the guide appears, the person who leads himself even when everything around him is in chaos. Becoming a guide does not mean that everything is the same to you. It means that you learn to walk with emotional stability even when the environment does not cooperate. It means that you choose to act with purpose instead of reacting with anger. It means that you become an example of control, not a reflection of impulses. You can't guide anyone if you yourself overflow at the first provocation. You can't talk about maturity if you break down inside every time something bothers you. But if you are able to stand firm when everything is burning, then you become a reference, not for others, for you. Leaving the position of victim is not about hardening yourself or swallowing what you feel. It's about choosing the harder path, total responsibility, accepting that, although you don't control what happens, you can control how you act, how you think, how you behave. There are two paths in the face of anger: the one who sinks into complaint and the one who becomes a guide. One wastes time blaming, The other uses anger as a signal to strengthen himself. One waits, the other acts. If you want to master your anger, start by leading yourself, because whoever guides himself is never a prisoner of his own emotion. 8. Locate your internal minds before stepping on them. Anger rarely appears out of nowhere. There's always something inside that was already charged. An open wound, a hidden insecurity, a memory that still hurts. The problem is that you don't see it until it explodes like a buried mine. You're walking calmly and suddenly something happens and everything explodes. Not because of what happened, but because you stepped right where it hurt the most, and you didn't even know that was there. If you want to master your anger, you have to do the uncomfortable work. Recognize your internal triggers, that which irritates you more than it should, that which touches your pride, that which you cannot tolerate, because it reveals parts of you that you have not yet accepted. Those are your minds, and until you identify them, they will continue to explode at the worst times. It's not about living in constant alert. It's about knowing yourself deeply, observing your reactions, your patterns, your weak points. Do you get angry when someone corrects you, when you're not paid attention to, when things don't go as you expect? All of this speaks of something deeper, and that something is what you need to work on if you really want to have control. Most people live reacting without knowing why. They shout, slam the table, get frustrated, and they don't understand what broke them inside. But those who take the time to look inside, to identify their wounds, their limiting beliefs, their unresolved voids, gain a huge advantage. They can anticipate. They can see anger coming before it consumes them. This is emotional prevention. Don't wait to explode to understand yourself. Do it before. Explore your past stories, your triggers, your accumulated emotions. Self-knowledge is not a luxury. It's a necessity if you want to live in peace. When you know where your minds are, you can move more intelligently. You can pause before reacting. You can choose wiser responses. You can take care of your relationships, your energy, your dignity. Mastering anger is not about eliminating the emotion. It's about understanding it. It's about knowing the emotional terrain you walk on every day. Because the one who knows where they step does not break easily.
Thank you for staying until the end of the video. If you watched the whole thing, comment "I am Stoic" as our secret signal to know that you're a true student of Stoicism. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. See you in the next video, and remember, keep cultivating your Stoic mind.